Thank you very much, David, and thank you, everybody. What a great turnout. You might think it's a little odd that I stopped to bring my apple juice up here, but it's because I got a phone call today from one of our brotherhood who were in Bosnia all together, Ed Vuljami, and he said, it's good that we're getting together because we can raise a glass to the man with the glasses. And you just saw the picture of Kurt Schork, many pictures of Kurt Schork in his working life run through the screen there. And I think, this year I'm not going to cry because every year we get very, very moved and emotional about what happened nearly 8 years ago and what it meant to all of us, certainly those of us who loved him and who worked alongside him. But I think looking at those pictures this year, there's actually something to celebrate. There always has been something to celebrate, but I feel it especially this year because with time maybe we can step back and remember the light that he brought us. We can remember the collegiality that he stood for. We can remember that at a time and in an environment of desperate competition, a young journalist really going out there to make their mark, to do the best they can, he inspired amongst all of us in that little tight-knit group of the Sarajevo Press Corps a deep friendship, a deep respect for each other's work. And he, along with myself and others, such as Martin Bell from the BBC, all the agencies, Reuters, AP, and all the electronic media groups, basically instituted an unprecedented arrangement, which was called the Sarajevo Pool. And what that meant was that we decided amongst ourselves, and then we presented it to our corporate leaders, we decided that we were going to share. We were going to share the burdens, the dangers, and the actual raw footage. We would go out and we would not all go to the same cluster and put ourselves all at risk for one event. Instead, we would go around, we would share that burden, and when we came back, we would swap and share and exchange the information. And this, for young journalists who were starting out and who got their training wheels, if you like, taken off in this particular work, in this kind of war coverage, was a remarkable lesson because it taught us the value of, yes, competition, but also friendship, collegiality, and respect for each other. And we knew that we weren't all going to go out and rush blindly into danger just for the sake of trying to make a mark when we didn't need to. Yes, there were stories, and Kurt certainly broke many of them, which were exclusive, but we knew that when it was not necessary, we didn't have to go out and put each other and put ourselves at risk unnecessarily. And this has stuck certainly with me, and I'm sure all of us who were part of the Sarajevo Press Corps for all those many years. You can't say enough good about Kurt because he did epitomize the kind of mature, responsible, dramatic journalism that I think that really defines or should define what we do. And frankly, the longer it goes, the more time passes, the more we appreciate Kurt and his influence on all of us and the integrity that he stood for, the seriousness that he stood for. He was never mean, he was never gotcha kind of journalist, he was never unpleasant, even to those who he was holding rigorously to account. But he was serious and he never let go. And you couldn't go to a press conference, you couldn't be a leader or an official and sit at a press conference and expect to be able to spin your way out of it or dance your way out of answering the tough questions when Kurt was at that press conference. And there's a great quote from one of the leaders of certainly American television journalism, Fred Friendly, who once said, our job is not to make up people's minds or to set the agenda. Our job is to make the agony, to make decision-making such agony that the only way to escape that agony is to think about it, is by thinking. And certainly Kurt made those people whom he interviewed, whom he talked to, think about what they were doing and think about how they would answer the questions that he put to them and some of the questions that we wish that we had put to them. For us, being in Sarajevo was dramatically important. And I talk about Sarajevo because although he and myself and many of us who were there then have done many other things, I do believe that the Bosnia War was the defining moment of our generation. That is where we learned what it meant to be war correspondents. That is where we learned what it meant to recognize the reality of what was going on. We learned that we could not draw a false equivalence, even though we were being urged to draw an equivalence between all parties. It's where we faced for the first time on our watch, in our backyard, genocide in front of the 20th century mass media, and where we were forced to make a decision on how we were going to report, on what we were going to say, that it wasn't okay to just say all sides are equally guilty like the world leaders were saying, that it wasn't okay to say this was just an intractable, centuries-old ethnic conflict, that we had to call it like it was, and that was dangerous. It put us at risk on the ground, and it made us deeply unpopular with the world leaders and with our own leaders, which of course we didn't care about, but it was our point of maturity. It was where we learned what it meant to be a real journalist in the real world. And I think Kurt was really the professor. He was really the man from whom we all learned, and whenever there was a question, whenever we were in doubt, whenever we wanted confirmation of a story, we would call Reuters and we'd ask to speak to Kurt. And when he told us, we knew it was right, and we would go with it. And on that note, I just want to say that he is much more than one journalist who was felled in the course of duty. His legacy remains, and as I say, it's very difficult to find people who hold and who stand up to that standard that he set. And it's more and more difficult now, because what we did then and what he did then is less and less respected, is less and less part of the body of journalism. Too often, too much of our airwaves, our newspaper print is devoted, unfortunately, to the unserious, to the sensational, to the tabloid. And so again, I say we were lucky to be where we were when we were there and with the people who we were with. Kurt's death also, sadly, he had to die, but his death propelled our leadership to take journalist safety seriously, to realize that it costs money and it costs resources and it costs goodwill to protect journalists who are willing to go out and put their lives at risk to be the eyes and the ears of the public. And there were people for whom, there were people like Rodney Pinder and others who I'm going to introduce in a second to come up here and take over, who took the lead in that fight, who took the lead in putting journalist safety at the top of the agenda. And it hasn't been easy, and to be frank, it's taken up a lot of resources, and sometimes it prevents and takes the space in terms of resources of what we would like to be able to spend in terms of going out and covering the story. But it's essential, and many people's lives have been saved, many journalists' lives have been saved since Kurt and his colleague and our friend Miguel were killed that day in May of 2000 in Sierra Leone, because then everybody started to take it really seriously. And sadly to say, the Committee to Protect Journalists, year after year for the last several years, has reported that the leading cause of death amongst journalists today in the world is deliberate. We're not just caught in the crossfire. We are deliberately targeted because they want to silence the messenger. They don't want to hear the truth. And so I'm going to ask Rodney Pinder to come up, Director of the International News Safety Institute, to talk about the impact on that regard that Kurt's death has, and the impact that it's made on keeping us all much safer since. Rodney.